Sergeant Eric Rhodes woke up to a strange call on the radio. The operator's voice was alarming. There was some kind of unrest in El Paso and orders to keep the crews on standby. His crew, Command Sergeant Alex "Dog" Jefferson, Driver Johnny Lucas, Gunner Miguel Sanchez, and rookie mechanic Travis Reynolds, were all already seated in the M2A3 Bradley armored personnel carrier. The training ground was still dark, but the city lights on the horizon glowed strangely, a yellow, flickering flame. "Are we going on patrol in the middle of the night?" Travis muttered as he pulled on his flak jacket. "Worse," Dog replied. "They say it's not a riot. It's something new. Something bizarre." At 5 o'clock, the order came, "Bradley crew, to full combat readiness." The city was under threat, and contact with several units had been lost. The goal was to reach the missing National Guard unit in the suburbs. Bradley's engine roared. Miguel rotated the turret camera, scanning the streets, while Eric stared at the tablet with maps. In a few minutes, they were already breaking through the northern part of El Paso. The first anomaly: the streets were completely empty. And then, a body. A person was lying on the road, his face torn apart, but he was getting up. Getting up. "What the hell is that?" Johnny managed to shout before the dead man lunged at the car. "Fire, Miguel," Eric commanded. The 25mm machine gun roared, and the first of many monsters turned into a bloody stain. But there were more of them, and with every passing minute, they were getting closer. The sun was just beginning to rise above the horizon as the Bradley made its way through the abandoned suburbs of El Paso. Clouds of smoke billowed from the striped sky. The streets were littered with abandoned cars, scattered personal belongings, and blood. Sergeant Eric Rhodes held a tablet with GPS coordinates. The map showed the last known location of the National Guard unit, St. James School. For the past 30 minutes, all communication with them had been lost. "We have to check this place out," Eric said, glancing at Dog. "If they're still alive, they're damn lucky," Dog replied, removing the safety catch from his M4 carbine. Bradley slowly rolled across the schoolyard. Tents, several trucks, and boxes of ammunition were visible on the sports field. But it was quiet around them, too quiet. Miguel opened the top hatch and pointed the thermal imager at the school building. "There's movement, but damn it, they're all cold. They're not people." "Travis, turn up the power to the external loudspeakers," Eric ordered. "This is Sergeant Rhodes, U.S. Army. If you're alive, come out." There was no response. Instead, figures began to emerge one by one from the school doors. Disheveled, bloodied, slow, and with missing eyes. One was in uniform, with a National Guard patch. "It's them," Johnny exhaled. "They're all dead." A second later, the BMP shook as a dozen zombies rushed forward, banging on the armor. One jumped on the hatch, trying to pull Miguel out. He reacted instantly. A short burst from the M240 machine gun, and the body fell. "Gunner, Sector 12. Johnny, step on it," Eric shouted. The Bradley turned, firing several bursts from its 25mm cannon. Concrete, blood, and flesh flew in all directions. Amidst the cries of the dead and the roar of the engine, the crew broke out of the courtyard. "This isn't a rescue operation," Eric said quietly. "This is purgatory. And we're the last ones who can still get out of here alive," added Dog, reloading his weapon. A new order lay ahead: evacuate civilians from Del Sol Hospital. But no one knew how long the night would last, or if it would end at all. The hospital was visible from afar, a 10-story concrete structure with wide windows from which faces peered out. People. Alive. They waved, trying to attract attention. Someone even held up a piece of cloth like a flag. "There are survivors," Miguel confirmed, staring at the thermal imager. "A lot of them. Maybe 60 to 70 people. Possibly more." Sergeant Rhodes glanced at the tablet. "According to intelligence, There were about 50 patients, medical staff, and security personnel hiding here. Everything was supposed to be under control, but communication was lost 3 hours ago. Do you think it's too late? Travis asked from the cabin. If we had arrived an hour later, it would definitely have been too late, Eric replied. Bradley rolled up to the entrance, nearly crushing the body of a nurse lying in a pool of blood. The door to the lobby was open. The air was thick with the smell of chlorine, death, and smoke. Eric, Dog, and Miguel went inside. The first floor was silent. Only the dripping of water and the intermittent electric buzzing of the neon emergency sign could be heard. The floor was covered in blood, but there were no bodies. Strange. It could have been much worse, said Miguel, grabbing his radio. Bradley, this is Raven 1. All clear. Moving on. They reached the elevator lobby. There were claw marks on the wall. The door of one of the elevators was torn open. It smelled rotten inside. Stairs. Only stairs, Dog muttered. When they reached the 7th floor, they encountered a security guard, unharmed, trembling with a gun in his hand. He pointed to the wards, where patients, nurses, and several children were barricaded. They're knocking on the door. They never tire, he said, almost crying. The evacuation began immediately. Johnny blocked the entrance to the hospital by setting up a claymore mine, while Eric and Miguel led people in groups to the armored personnel carrier. Dog and Travis guarded the stairs. But a rumbling could already be heard from below. They're coming, Travis shouted. There are dozens of them. One of the wounded children began to scream. Panic ensued. A nurse lost consciousness. People rushed down to the exit, followed by a horde of zombies. Claymore, activate, Eric shouted. A powerful explosion blew up the stairwell, but several bodies engulfed in flames continued to move. Everyone to the Bradley. Now, Dog shouted, firing bursts. The crew took in passengers in complete chaos. The armor was already creaking from the blows of the dead. The moment the last child jumped inside, Johnny pressed the gas pedal. The 25mm cannon cleared the way. Dog was behind the machine gun. Miguel was covering from the hatch. The wounded cried, clinging to each other, trying to understand what was happening. When the BMP finally drove out onto the open road, everyone realized they had saved more than just people. They had saved hope. Where to now? Johnny asked. Eric replied quietly. To the base. If it still exists. The BMP roared along the road, dodging overturned cars, dead bodies, and scenes of chaos. Inside the armored vehicle, there was a tense silence. A child clung to his mother, several people moaned in pain, and a nurse pressed down on the wound of a soldier who had lost a lot of blood. Miguel sat opposite, silent, but with fire in his eyes. Time? Eric asked. 5:20 p.m. We started at 7:30 a.m. 10 hours of chaos, Johnny replied. And it's just beginning, Travis added, staring at the outline of Fort Vickers, already visible over the hill. The fort was built during the Cold War, modernized in the 2010s, and had a serious defense system. However, its appearance now was alarming. The main gate was open, and there were no guards on the watchtower. Smoke swirled in the air. Something's wrong, Miguel whispered. It's either a trap or it's empty. Deploy the Bradley. Keep the main entrance in your sights. Dog and I will check the area. If everything is clear, we'll evacuate the people inside, Eric ordered. The Bradley stopped 20 meters from the gate. Sergeant Eric and Dog moved forward, covering each other. The area looked deserted. There was blood on the asphalt. The door to the headquarters had been broken down. The bodies of soldiers lay torn apart, but with gunshot wounds to the head. Gunshots, not bites. They shot each other, Dog stated. They must have lost control. Panic. Or not all of them were infected, but they suspected everyone, Eric replied. They checked the main warehouse, empty. Then, the command center. That's where they found the recording. The base captain, seriously wounded, left a video message. We took in 150 civilians. One of them was infected, but didn't show any signs right away. For hours later, the first transformation. We isolated Block C, but it was too late. I ordered the main gate to be closed, but someone opened it from the inside. I lost control of the people. Some escaped. Some died. If you are hearing this, don't trust anyone, not even yourself. Eric turned off the recording. The base can be used, but it must be cleaned first. Otherwise, it's just a tomb with concrete walls. They returned to the BMP. Bad news. The base is infected. But we'll take it back. How? Asked one of the nurses. The same way we storm any facility, bullet by bullet, floor by floor, until it's ours again. The evacuation to the technical hangar went quickly. Travis stayed with Bradley to provide cover. Eric, Dog, Miguel, and Johnny set out to clean up the headquarters. The zombies in the barracks were already slow, not in the first hours of infection. Their bodies were decomposing. But there were also fresh ones, fast, vicious, like predators. One almost tore Miguel apart when he was clearing the showers. But Johnny was quick, a precise shot to the temple. An hour later, it was all over. The base belonged to the living again. Eric hung the American flag taken from the Bradley on the main flagpole. It was tattered and blood-stained, but intact. Today we stood our ground. Tomorrow, we'll see, he said, watching the sunset bathe the concrete in red light. Night fell on Fort Vickers like a black veil. Although the base belonged to the living again, everyone felt that the real danger was still ahead. The courtyard was surrounded by makeshift barricades, and Bradley stood under cover, ready for battle. We have a supply of water, some weapons, a little fuel. But we're cut off. No communication with the outside world, Miguel reported, looking over the surviving equipment. So we're screwed, Johnny muttered, sitting on a box of ammunition. Dog tried to set up a field radio. His fingers quickly pressed buttons, caught waves, and tuned frequencies. A hum, a hiss, silence, and then suddenly, all units. This is NORAD Command. We have lost control of Zone 4. Zones 2, 5, 7, evacuated. Any surviving personnel should proceed to Checkpoint Reserve 1. I repeat, Checkpoint Reserve 1. They're still alive, Dog exclaimed. NORAD is giving us the coordinates. It's 200 miles from here. So what? Are we going there and leaving all the civilians behind? Johnny asked with a look of contempt. We're military. We have orders. And now we have a target, Eric replied firmly. We have to decide what's more important, following orders or saving these lives here, Miguel interjected. The argument turned into a silent crisis. No decision was made. Only later, when the sun had not yet risen and the base was shrouded in twilight, did something happen that put everything in its place. An alarm sounded. The old motion detection system on the western perimeter came to life. Dozens of red dots appeared on the screen. What is it? Asked the nurse, entering the headquarters. It's the end of the silence, whispered Dog. Bradley came to life along with the crew. Eric took the commander's seat, Johnny was the gunner, and Miguel was the driver. Dog remained at the base with civilians and several medics, holding the defense. They're coming out of the forest, Johnny reported, looking through the thermal imager. There are a lot of them. These aren't random infected. It's a herd. The crew left the base and took up position on a hill. When the zombies emerged from the trees, a crowd, hundreds of them, unconscious shadows, Johnny opened fire with a 25mm cannon. The shells tore up the ground, bodies flew apart, but the crowd only grew. Eric gave short commands. They held back the wave, but it was impossible to stop it completely. Miguel turned the IFV around, firing as he retreated to the fort. We won't be able to hold them for long, he shouted. Then we have to make a choice. Leave the civilians behind or take them with us. Eric replied, How are we going to fit them all in one Bradley? Johnny exclaimed. All eyes turned to Dog, who reappeared on the radio. Listen, there's another vehicle here, he began. An old armored truck for evacuating ammunition. It's operational, but someone has to drive it. Eric understood everything without words. Gather everyone. We're going to reserve one. Together. He knew this mission would be like suicide, but leaving them behind would be worse. Fort Vickers burned in the darkness, not from flames, but from tension, fear, and the deafening rumble of armored vehicles. Accompanied by the roar of the infected, the Bradley crew and the survivors prepared for a desperate escape. Two vehicles stood in the central courtyard. An M2 Bradley infantry fighting vehicle, already battle-scarred, covered in scratches and black spots from cannon fire. An old M939 armored truck, covered with improvised steel plates, barely holding together. Civilians had gathered inside the fortress warehouse, several medics, a few surviving soldiers, an elderly electrician, a young female student who had gotten lost here at the time of the disaster, and a wounded corporal. The truck was their only chance to get out. Miguel, get behind the wheel of the Bradley. Johnny, you take the gun. Dog, you stay with the civilians and drive the truck. I'll coordinate the movement and maintain communication, Eric commanded clearly. His voice was calm, but his eyes were icy. Do you realize that this barn will break down halfway there? Johnny asked, nodding toward the truck. Better it breaks down on the move than we all rot here, Dog replied. At 3:12 a.m., they set off. Bradley led the column, his thermal imagers scanning the forest ahead, his gun at the ready. The truck was behind, its engine roaring, and every bump on the body felt like a blow to the soul. When they reached the north gate, it was already bending under the pressure. We're breaking through. Johnny, open up. Eric shouted. Opening heavy fire, they broke through the crowd of zombies and burst onto the nighttime forest road. The creatures ran after them, but with every passing minute, the sound of the engine and gunfire receded from the horror of the fort. At 4:40 a.m., they stopped. Doga's car transmission had overheated. 5 minutes. No more. Eric snapped. We're in a risk zone. While Miguel and Johnny surveyed the perimeter, Eric tried to check the map. The outdated GPS was malfunctioning. Suddenly, a 12-year-old boy ran out of the bushes. He was barefoot, wearing a torn shirt, and in a panic. They killed everyone. My family. He cried, trembling. Eric grabbed him and threw him into the truck. How many are there? Where are they from? They are in the barn. There are many. Another wave. New infected. Get in the car. Move. Eric shouted. Miguel started the Bradley's engine. Dog pressed the pedal to the floor. Johnny covered them, firing short bursts until they got too close. During the breakout, one of the zombies jumped onto the roof of the truck. He clung on with his hands, trying to reach the hatch. Eric shot through the roof of the Bradley, destroying him. He could have ruined everything, whispered Dog. At 6 o'clock, sunrise. On the horizon was Checkpoint Reserve 1. The radio came to life again. Identify yourselves. You are approaching an isolated zone. Prepare for inspection. Is this the end? Asked the female student. No, replied Eric. This is the beginning. At 6:15 a.m., after an endless night of horror, the Bradley IFV crew and a convoy of civilians in an armored truck reached the reserve, 1 checkpoint. The area was surrounded by a concrete wall with barbed wire and automatic turrets on towers. At the entrance, they were met by 2 soldiers in black helmets without identification marks. One held a carbine with a silencer at the ready, the other a scanner. Identify the crew and provide the access code, they demanded, without further ado. Eric stepped forward. Sergeant Eric Connors, Texas 23 Unit, M2 Bradley. with civilians and wounded on board. Emergency evacuation code, Lotus 5-1. Confirmed. Proceed. But the soldier paused and looked at the loader. Civilians are being quarantined. You are separate. Leave your weapons here. Hell no. We're with them to the end. Johnny barked from the gun. Orders from Hydra Center Command. Everyone is equal here. Even you, soldiers, said the guard and waved toward the isolation ward. Inside Reserve 1, everything seemed too sterile. Concrete, cells, white light. They were searched and separated. The Bradley crew went to the room for cleansed military personnel. The civilians went to the quarantine hangar with metal bars. The wounded corporal was taken away on a stretcher. No explanation was given. At 7:10 a.m., a medic in a biohazard suit asked Eric, "Did you see the initial outbreak? Did you have contact with the infected?" "We fought them. We burned hundreds of them. I helped the wounded myself. If you're infected, shoot me right now. We're looking for those who survive after being bitten. Are there any among you?" Eric was silent, but he remembered the boy they had picked up. He had a scratch. Was it a bite? He didn't know. Meanwhile, Johnny made his way to the quarantine hangar. There, behind bars, civilians were shouting and banging on the metal. "They're not feeding us. They take them away and don't bring them back. It's a trap." He made eye contact with a female student. She pointed to the door leading into the facility. Her lips formed the words, "There's something terrible in there." At 8 a.m., a general appeared, accompanied by special forces. He spoke calmly, clearly, like a machine gun. "You are soldiers. You were trained for war. And today it has begun. But not against terrorism. Against a biological threat. And the enemy is already inside. One thing is required of you, obedience. And you will have a chance to survive." Miguel couldn't take it anymore. This is no longer an army. This is a concentration camp. The general smiled. "You haven't seen real camps yet, Sergeant. But you will, if you live to see tomorrow." At 8:25 a.m., Eric gathered the crew in the utility room under the pretext of checking the map. "There," in whispers, he said, "we're not being saved here. We're an experiment. They're gathering us one by one, sterilizing us, studying us, testing a vaccine, maybe a new weapon. We have to escape. Today." "And how do you imagine escaping from a military bunker?" asked Dog. "Through those doors that guard the civilians. Something there. Maybe the sewer system. Maybe a storage facility. We either take the risk or become lab rats." The soldiers exchanged glances. The verdict was unanimous. "We are a crew. We pulled people out of hell. And we're not leaving them now." "Tonight," said Eric. "Get ready." At 10:45 p.m., when most of the guards at Reserve 1 had changed shifts and fatigue and tension hung in the air, Bradley's crew sprang into action. Eric, Johnny, Dog, and Miguel knew there would be no second chance. Through a ventilation shaft Dog had discovered, they made their way into the quarantine sector. Inside, it was dimly lit, stuffy, and smelly, and the people there were broken. Some were no longer breathing. Others had changed. Quiet. Eric hissed when a muffled growl came from the darkness. What stood in the far corner had been a civilian a few hours ago. Its eyes glowed with a pale light. Its mouth pulsed as if something was moving inside it. It lunged. A shot. Another. A third. Johnny, with his silenced gun, shot the monster in the forehead. The others woke up. Screams. Cries. Panic. "Everyone who's still alive, follow us." Eric opened the emergency door into the depths of the underground level, where the student girl had pointed earlier. Dark corridors, metal stairs, dusty lamps. There was an old evacuation tunnel, built during the Cold War. But before entering the tunnel, they passed a huge airtight hall. Inside were dozens of beds. People in handcuffs. Their internal organs were exposed, their skin cut open. Nearby were life support machines, incubators, test tubes, and something that was no longer human. "They're using the infected to create something new," whispered the student. "I saw the military bring a guy from our bus here. They're testing a vaccine. But something went wrong." There were guards at the door to the hall. Before they could react, a siren sounded. "Evacuation. All groups to level 3. The crew opened fire. A grenade. Smoke. Screams. Miguel was wounded in the leg, but he didn't stop. They break the seal on the tunnel door. Inside is a long pipe leading toward the old railroad. At 11:40 p.m., after walking several kilometers, the group finally emerges at an abandoned depot. Fresh air on the surface. The sky is dark, but safe. For now. Now we're off the radar. "But they'll be looking for us," says Eric. "And we'll tell everyone what they were doing there," replies Johnny. "If we survive," adds Miguel. Suddenly, there's a flash on the horizon. One, then another. A powerful rumble, like explosions from inside the bunker. Then, complete silence. "Reserve. One has been destroyed. They don't leave any traces," whispers the girl. The crew stares into the darkness ahead. Their Bradley has been destroyed. The army is silent. But now they have a mission. They must survive and tell the world what really happened. The darkness over the abandoned depot only deepened the anxiety. Rain pounded on the rusty roof, and an unnatural, artificial silence hung in the air. No dogs, no birds, only the echo of their own breathing. The crew, along with a few rescued civilians, found temporary shelter in the basement under the station. Dog bandaged Miguel's leg. Eric examined the maps they had found, looking for where to go next. "This isn't over yet. They won't leave us alone," said Johnny, staring at the monitor of the old thermal detector. And he was right. 2 miles from the depot, Spectrum 9 had already landed. A squad of 6 elite Special Forces soldiers who had received a single order. Eliminate. Leave no traces. They moved without lights, with thermal imaging, in complete silence. One of them, the commander with the call sign Phoenix, knew that these guys from Bradley had seen too much. If the information leaked out, the world would never know the truth, because he would be dead long before that happened. 1:10. In the depot, Johnny heard a strange sound. A faint screech of metal. "They found us. It's time to go." The crew decided to move through the tunnels to the city reservoir, where, according to an old map, there was an emergency civil defense command post. "They're faster than us. They know the area. Our only advantage is that we have nothing left to lose," said Eric, loading his last magazine. 1:45, the first encounter. Phoenix gave the signal, and 2 of his men made contact in the eastern tunnel. But Dog, hearing their footsteps 20 meters away, prepared an ambush. PFPF. A short burst, an explosion of a smoke grenade. One black is dead. The other is wounded in the thigh, but he pressed the alarm button. 2:10, suddenly. A new signal. Infected. Not 1 or 2 creatures. A whole pack. They heard the shooting. They were coming toward the sound. Phoenix realized that now he was not only hunting his target. Now the survival of his squad was also at stake. The crew and civilians managed to reach an old pumping station on the edge of the forest. It could be defended from the inside. "We have a few hours until dawn. If we survive, we'll try to contact headquarters in the east," Eric said. But Johnny silently puts his machine gun on the window, looking through the sights at the darkness of the forest. They're already here. An explosion, then a burst of machine gun fire, then the roar of zombies. All hell breaks loose. People against people. People against the infected against everyone. One of the Spectrum 9 fighters dies in close combat. Another is caught in the jaws of a zombie. Phoenix sees that those they were pursuing are putting up a competent defense, holding their position and rescuing civilians. For a moment, he hesitates. This does not look like a threat to the state. It looks like heroism. Retreat. Immediately, he shouts over the internal channel when he sees that his mission is not only doomed, but also morally corrupt. 3:30. Silence. The enemy has retreated. The infected have scattered. The moon is high in the sky. The crew members sit wearily by the iron hatch of the pumping station. The girl rescued from the bunker looks at them with tears of gratitude. Eric stands up and says, "Dawn is near. The story we carry forward can change everything." Fog enveloped the pumping station, turning it into a ghost among the ruins. A distant roar came from the east, but the immediate surroundings seemed silent. The team sat in the semi-darkness of the technical room, each bandaging wounds, cleaning weapons, or simply remaining silent. "How many of us are there?" Eric whispered. 5. Dog replied, shrugging his shoulders. "Out of 13. Next to them lay a tablet with the data they had obtained, videos, documents, coordinates. Everything that proved that the virus was an experiment that had gotten out of control. Or maybe it hadn't. If we don't tell the world, it was all for nothing," said Johnny, pressing down on the bleeding wound on his side. "There's an old command center under the city. The transmitters might still be working there. If you want a chance, that's it," said Doc. They had no transportation, only their feet and weapons. But there was no time. The march through the suburbs was like moving through petrified hell. Everywhere there were corpses, burned-out cars, dead silence. Suddenly, there was a click. A mine was set. Shrapnel tore through the ground. One of the civilians fell, wounded. "Don't stop," Eric commanded, lifting the wounded man onto his shoulders. Behind them, movement began. A crowd of infected people was on their trail. They moved quickly, with rusty hands, twisted spines, and torn faces. The battle for the bunker lasted 20 minutes. The old gates, which once held back a possible nuclear threat, now protected against something even worse. The team managed to barricade themselves inside when the horde rammed the steel doors. The radio was old, but connected to a backup antenna. Eric connected the flash drive with the data with trembling fingers. Johnny was breathing heavily, his eyes wandering across the ceiling. "Pass this on. If not us, then who?" he whispered, squeezing Eric's hand. The signal went out. They were heard. A voice appeared on the frequency. "This is NATO Command. Repeat your message." "My call sign is Storm. We are the remnants of the Texas 23 unit. We have evidence. The virus is man-made. We have names. We have locations. We are transmitting the data. I repeat, we are transmitting the data. This did not happen by accident." In the silence of the bunker, the radio wave lived on. The transmission continued. As long as the generator was still working, the world could hear them. Dawn colored the horizon. Eric stood at the door. On the other side was a broken world. Inside was silence, death, and truth. He lowered his eyes to Johnny's body, then to the map. Their war was just beginning. It was only the first day. Next came the fight for truth, for humanity, for the future.